Good evening, everyone. Thanks for coming, and I see some faces from last time, and thank you for coming. We had a really good meeting the last time, and we'll see where we go tonight. But we're here to talk about the so-called Linden property, and it's property bounded by Linden and Phillips Street. It's a 5¼ acre parcel, and it's an effort, or the tonight is all about continuing the process of envision what that property should be, and that's where everybody in the audience comes in to offer suggestions and think about what's the best use to it. My name is Al Beeler. I'm chairman of the Planning Commission. I'm joined by AJ Pescur. Wave your hand. Hello, there she is. And also there's a couple of folks on the online from the Planning Commission. Matt showed Summer Scheller, and I think Eric Melchop is not. He's another member of the Planning Commission. I think he's out of town. John Oliveria, where are you, John? President of Council. Justin Marks is here. Greg Wozniak is here. I think that's it. And there's a couple of folks again from Council online. Oh, yeah, of course. Oh, Colette, of course. The mayor is here. In addition, sorry? Okay. Jim Driver, president of the school board, is here. Also, Brittany Bova and Louise Smith, members of the school board. They have serious, significant interest in the property. The property is 5¼ acre property. 4 acres are under the ownership of the school board, and 1¼ acres Crafton. But the school board wanted to work with Crafton and jointly ask for ideas on what the best future use will be. So what the next thing is for me is to get out of the way here. It could be for people who have constantly run around and do the mic thing, but I want to introduce not only first of all, of course, Jim Price, borough manager, and also the speaker tonight is going to be Chris Rigger. Chris and his team from OHM Advisors are the consultant team doing the work to facilitate the envisioning process. As I say, we Chris was really surprised and pleased with our last meeting, and because folks were just really forthcoming with good ideas. So we look forward to having that again tonight. And with that, Chris, you're on.
All right. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for coming out this evening. I know we got about 10 people on Zoom, and I'll offer the same apology that I did last session. I apologize that you see the bald spot on my head from Zoom. But I do appreciate folks coming out this evening. As Al mentioned, we're here to talk about property at the corner of Steuben and Linden Avenue. Tonight's agenda is, a listening session. Within this project, we'll walk through what the phases are, but the specific agenda and within this phase of the project is to hear as many voices from the community as we can, so that we can hear a broad perspective, hear sentiments from the community, and then the next step will be we'll craft that into a vision and be able to come back and share that for testing, so we can see did we get it right, do we need to change some things. So we have a presentation here at about, if I'm doing my talking here, it's probably about 15 minutes. And I think it's important to give a little bit of context to the conversation and the feedback that we received this evening. The topic is the future chapter of this property. And I will admit and recognize with everybody, this is a difficult conversation. This is a current green space, been used by the community for a long time, and it's being considered for alternate uses, which can be kind of a difficult thing to approach. But what I will echo is we had a great session last time, as Al mentioned. We had probably about 50 people. I think every chair was filled in the room. And if it were my community, I'd be really proud of the dialogue and the session. People were able to provide a variety of opinions on from a couple of different angles and listen to each other and have a really respectful conversation. So thank you, everybody who was here for that, and looking forward to that again this evening. So what we'll do is I'll run through the presentation, and what I'd like to do is make sure that we hear from folks who were not here last time. Can folks raise their hands who were not at the last listening session? Oh, good, good. We got plenty of folks here who will see this for the first time. Plenty of people will see it for a second. But I think what I'd love to do is prioritize folks who were not at the last session, we have not heard from yet. And if you were here last time, thank you for coming back. And I think I would ask that you're in, at least for the first part, a similar mode as to what I am, which is to listen to folks who have not had a chance to express their opinions yet. Like I said, this is truly a listening session. We have not made any decisions. We're not making any decisions tonight. We're simply here to hear the different perspectives and voices as we move through this process. So let us go through the presentation. This is all context. Don't let this steer or suggest that your opinion should change. But I think it's important that as we talk about this process, that everybody has some of the background as to what our team at OHM is working with as constraints, and ultimately how some of this information will be synthesized moving forward. Are you the hot finger?
Looking at everything.
It's a good looking cover. So for transparency, and so that everybody knows, like Al said, my name is Chris Riggert. I'm a landscape architect. I'm a planner with OHM Advisors. We're an integrated planning, design, and engineering firm. I'm also the managing principal of our Pittsburgh office, which is located in the city. My background is almost exclusively in projects at the site. We're working with communities, whether that be a municipality or a township or borough, county, a state agency, to be able to run community vision projects where we hear diversity of opinions and help craft the outcomes so communities can thrive. This is the project charter for what we are working with the school districts and the borough, which is to create a shared community vision that guides future development and decision-making for the Linden Avenue site. A few key components of the approach. Test realistic site alternatives. That's why I think this presentation is important, is to make sure that we kind of know what is realistic, and we can help, make sure that comments or feedback is given in a way that make sure we get practical outcomes. Make trade-offs clear. As I said, this is a difficult conversation. There are trade-offs to be had. That's what we're here to listen and test together. Build community consensus. That starts tonight. It actually started a while ago. Listening to the community. Create clear process-driven outcomes and provide a flexible framework for action. So that is our approach to this project. Let's keep moving. The phases of the project. We are in phase 2 right now, research and listen. There's really 4 phases. A launch, where we start the project, and importantly, each one of these boxes has a community engagement component. When we started this project, we did not start from scratch. We pulled from previous planning efforts and previous engagement efforts, so we could see what the community had said in the past, and we're not starting over. Research and listening. Bringing together some of the past components of the site and identifying realistic choices for trade-offs. So we are doing this listening session. This is 2 of 2. We will also have a RESLI survey that is out right now. If you have not taken the survey, please do. Anybody not taken the survey yet? Oh, good. One, okay. We'll make sure you get the survey. Thank you for raising your hand. And then we're also going to be doing focus groups and stakeholder interviews to be able to hone in on some options for the site. From that, we will then come back and test with the public. We will present those findings at a community open house. We'll also post them online so people can provide a comment. And then we'll go to finalizing that package. There'll be a final presentation to council. And the final vision will be posted online. So that's the process we're going through. We think we'll probably wrap up around the end of the year. So the site itself, here it is an aerial view from above. We have Steuben to the south. We have Linden to the east. We got Giant Eagle over to the northeast. About 5¼ acres. I think an important thing to identify here are a couple things. One is that there is a portion of the site that is actually in Ingram. And so that's something we'll have to consider. Yeah, a bird whistle. The other one site, the north side, is owned by the school district. The south side is owned by the borough. So there is a split in ownership. let's keep moving. So when we started this project, as I said, we didn't look to start from scratch. We looked at what is the history of the site, how does this function here in Crafton. Importantly, from 1950s on, right, this was the Crafton High School's football stadium, an important community destination. It had not seen development or any kind of development on that site until 2017 or 2018, when the borough received, or the school district received interest in developing this site. That graphic there is what the proposal at the time was, which was a gas station that fronted on Steuben Street and some commercial back behind. That offer establishes the benchmark. We're going to talk about that a little bit, but it establishes a fiscal benchmark that sort of informs our effort here today. We then saw interest from a group of residents in 2021 to turn this into a mixed commercial and green space. In 2023, the borough commissioned a market study to see what would be feasible on the site. And here we are in 2026 conducting the Imagine Linden process. So this is not starting from ground zero. There's a legacy of the site. There's previous work that's been done, and everything we're doing is building from that. We looked at past engagement efforts, and here's some of what we had heard from previous plans. Future development in Crafton should fit Crafton's character, provide a mix of uses between homes, shops, services, places to gather, things that serve the community. Strengthen connections through transit, walkability, leveraging Crafton Park across the street, surrounding neighborhoods for good connection. And include green and gathering space for opportunities to include usable green space and flexible spaces for people to gather. We also, in those previous efforts, saw that residents, in terms of the specific uses, would like to see neighborhood shopping. So grocery stores, clothing, shoe stores, craft and specialty shops. Some names that have been thrown out are Aldi's, Trader Joe's, Target. Places to eat and gather, so family-friendly restaurants, quality fast casual, and a wider variety of food options here closer to home. And flexible community spaces, so a space that could potentially host pop-up events, food trucks, farmers markets, family-friendly activities, and recreation. If we look at the site within Crafton, it's a very well-positioned site. There's a lot of great things about it in addition to it currently being a green space. We see Crafton Park directly to the south. Foster Park and Ingram is only across the plaza. Crafton Ingram Shopping Plaza is directly across the site. But it's also, within 10 minutes walk of downtown Crafton, 12-minute walk, and a 10-minute walk of a busway station, as well as St. Philip Church down the street. So it's a very, it's very well-positioned site. It's got a lot of amenities surrounding it. We also looked at the character of the corridors. So Steuben, if you were to drive down Steuben, what is the character? What does it look like? What does it feel like? And I think what's interesting here is we see a lot of different uses. Yellow is residential, green is park, blue is institutional, so that's the church, red is commercial. So if you just look at that area that's highlighting Steuben, you see all those uses represented. And what that tells us is that for this site, if we were to look at some potential uses of what would be appropriate, the question is, what is most appropriate? Well, there's a bunch of different uses around it. We can have a discussion around what's going to fit best. It's not just all residential, it's not just all commercial. So we might be able to entertain a mixture of uses. When we look at the site itself, there's a couple things we highlight here. One is the limited access recreation field is fully fenced in and used solely for school functions right now. It is a very visible site. So if you're driving along Steuben, either east or west, or you're coming south on Linden, it's essentially the gateway into the community if you're coming from the west. We also, as I defined, there's some area that's in Ingram, but I think really importantly, I want to flag too, whatever these uses are that may happen on this site, have to consider the fact that this site backs up to residential. These are people's backyards and homes, and so whatever happens here, we need to take into consideration the potential effects of light pollution, sound pollution, things like that. Okay, so this is where the benchmark comes into play. And I'm going to talk about finances, fiscal outcomes, and I think what I would encourage folks to sort of keep in mind is this is the backbone, but it's not the outcome, right? This is sort of the mechanics from behind the scenes, but what we really want to talk about we really want to hear is, what do you envision this to be? What could it look like? What could it feel like? What are its uses? But I do want to provide this context so people understand. The school district received an offer in 2017, 2018 for $3.6 million. We've charted here that gray line is the total price of the property plus the taxes it would accrue as a gas station potentially over time. For alternate uses, which we can talk about this evening, we need to consider how those compare to this benchmark. And so we've made some assumptions that there could be a lower purchase price, that there could be a horizon that maybe day one, it doesn't have to pay off, but it does need to pay off at some point for this to make sense to the school district. And so we're looking at how can we chart within this blue funnel. And that's the back end of the fiscal components of the uses that we'll talk about this evening. Any questions on that so far? Did I lose anybody in that information? I want to make sure people understand it. Okay. So using that benchmark, we looked at a couple different uses of things that we had seen from the engagement to see what's, if we just test from a fiscal benchmark, how do they perform? Gas station, well below. And this is a by acre benchmark, right? I can explain that if you have questions. But essentially, the value to the community and to the tax value over time of a gas station is quite low. We look at some of the commercial uses, we see they're also low. They don't quite hit the benchmark. And if we go to the next slide and we look at residential uses, we start to see these things exceed that benchmark. And that's because there's a little bit of different fiscal composition and taxable value of commercial versus residential uses. Happy to talk about that, but in general for this evening, hopefully it helps to just give a little bit of background on how these things perform. We go to the next slide. One thing I think is really important that I'm sure we're going to hear about this evening is green space as part of this development. That's something we heard from engagement, something we heard from the first listening session. And so I think there's very much integration of green space into a potential development is a real possibility. And what I would offer this evening is that there's kind of a scale there, right? That could be something like sidewalks with trees that go through like a trail. That could be a nice, community trail. Here it says walkable connections. That could be active business frontages. So frontages that are for plazas, or seating and activity. They could be dedicated community open space, like you see on the right, that is flexible and could take a variety of functions. But what I would also offer is that the scale of that kind of may depend on the scale of the development itself. And so if you look at the images to the right, you can see the buildings are a little bit bigger. And that's because just in terms of making these things pencil out, that's one of the trade-offs. Let's keep going. Now, hopefully this does not confuse folks too much, but essentially what this does is it compares different scenarios of housing, commercial, into different uses or different combinations. And they show us how they perform against that benchmark, right? So some of these fall below the benchmark. Some of these are at the benchmark. Some of them are above the dark green. And those that have the star on them have the potential to support maybe a green space as part of that development. Because that, again, that fiscal back end that we were talking about, the numbers just work in such a way that they're the most likely to be able to support a green space. Now, I will add the caveat here that I am not, one second, and I'll
just to clarify the slide.
Yeah. What I will say is I'm a community planner. I'm not a market analyst. I'm not I can't underwrite any of this, right? This is a visioning exercise for us to explore trade-offs in the best information that we have. I can't make any promises about the market itself. And so if you go out there and say, Chris said, we're going to get it Aldi, I can't promise that. So please don't say that. But I do think that what we can do is plan a scenario that can help those circumstances and make it more likely to be best case. Yes. Sure. So from this early modeling we did, some of the scenarios that look like they exceed the benchmark. 4 townhome pods, and that would be eight townhomes per pod, So that would be 32 to do the math, right? 32 townhomes and 2 mixed-use buildings. We've got 3 condo buildings and 1 mixed-use building. We've got 3 condo buildings and a food and beverage anchor. We have a 3 condo building and an inline commercial. And so what these are, the inline commercial would essentially be freestanding commercial, about 6,500 square feet. Can you hear me all right back there? Somebody shut me off. Okay. You guys are done with me already. How's that? Yeah. All right, where did we leave off here? Do I need to start all the way down here? Okay, I will. 3 condo buildings and a mixed-use building, 3 condo buildings and a food and beverage anchor, 3 condo buildings and an inline commercial building. And what those are, inline commercials, like freestanding buildings with 60. In this case, the model is 500 square feet, so it's probably 3 or so businesses that are just side by side. With the other thing.
That's probably working. I checked these batteries before we started. I tested them with the battery tester and they were at full power.
Probably my fault. Probably my fault. All right, there we go. I make this joke and my team makes fun of me, but it's not a good meeting without technical difficulties. So I don't know if we've had one. It's great. Okay, so these are the condo buildings in this column with a few of the different commercial options. And then this is a larger condo building. So if that one is 24 units, which is not labeled up there, but that was modeled at 24 units. This is modeled at 60 units. So we see specifically the ones that are, starred is 1 condo building with 2 mixed use buildings. And to just sort of get some background on what these are all prototypical and just things we created for the sake of understanding. Hopefully it helps understand a little bit. But the mixed use building would be ground floor commercial with some residential up above. The medium scale marketplace would be something like an Aldi. Food and beverage anchor would be like a freestanding restaurant, 6,500 square foot restaurant that might have an outdoor patio. The inline commercial is, like I said, sort of those lined up commercial units. And they're all modeled at 6,500 square feet. And then the gas station, which we learned, or I think the community learned back in 2017, 2018 was the least ideal option. We won't see the gas station. All right, so if we keep moving, hopefully we not have the last slide of questions on it. There we go. So we are going to move to the discussion, but first, before I do that, any questions about that content? I know it's kind of wonky, but I want to make sure folks understand. Yes, sir.
Can you hear me? That's good work. There's a lot of ideas up there, but the one idea that I did see up there, there's always a do nothing alternative. What happens if it stays like it is and we don't change the thing? Where does that fit with all the other options?
It's a good count. All right, that's right. Do nothing option is, I don't know, is this something you want to take or?
Yeah, I can. I think generally speaking, the school district is still interested in selling it. So they would be, if the borough doesn't want to do anything, most likely the school district would attempt to take both parcels back and probably sell it for what is permitted now, which is residential.
Yeah, okay.
What does that mean, take it back?
You want to give that? You want to do it? Yeah. So the one on the purple map up there. So Jim,
I understand the area, and the question I asked the last meeting was, the school district owns 3.5 acres and we own 1.5 acres. And it was the council of which I was a part of that sold that acreage to the school board with the understanding that it would retain, if it was to be sold, it would stay for the youth of our community. And when I hear it being said that they'll take it back, legally take it back? Are we willing to go to court over this? I mean, these are questions for the school board, actually.
Under the covenant, they have permission, they have to give us a year's notice and they can take it back. There's nothing in the deed, there's nothing in any of the writing on any of the legal paperwork mentioning the children's Grafton or anything like that. It's just a deed that they have permission to take back. So they need to give us a year's notice and they are able to claim it back.
And where can I see those documents?
We could have them presented. We could share them.
Yeah, and as I started this, I will say, this is not a necessarily the easiest conversation. I think that's worth recognizing. And I will say, I've been through some of these, I've seen these types of things happen, and it's not often that a community gets a chance to actually put forward the vision of what it could be, knowing that it's going to change, or that it could change. So it is a unique opportunity that's been provided to be able to provide the input, understanding that, there is an ideal scenario, which is to keep it green. I understand that I didn't add this at the top, but I actually live in Ingram, at the top of the hill. I shot a giant eagle. I got a 2.5-year-old. I understand, certainly. But again, tonight the discussion is, if it were to be something else, what could that be? What would be something that people could dream about or would add value? If not, when it is time. And let's make sure. Oh, thank you, sir. Let's see if we can hear from some folks that we did not hear from last time.
I have a question. In regards to your just comments, your current comments, you said that things are going to change. So are you saying that something is going to happen? Excluding the fact that it would stay as it is. And if that's the case, is this just all for show? Because you just said things are going to change.
I hear that. And the answer is no decisions have been made. I think the school district has a strong interest in selling the property. Like that's the parameters we're handed. We're here to help listen and facilitate. So that's the most I can give you. I think the school district does intend to sell the property. But I don't think that it's not for not. I do think this is something we're going to hand a final vision. We're here to listen. It's the second night that we're listening. And I take that very seriously. Hopefully we can show you that with the scenes that come out following the engagement.
Since Jim is here, can we hear from him just to get his perspective on things? Regarding to this.
What would you like to know?
Do you guys have an intent or an idea or a perspective to kind of get a bit more depth?
The question was looking at is intent or perspective.
Maybe I can answer both questions at the same time, and this is just me recalling 7, 8, 9 years of activity, but 10-ish years ago, the district went through a period of time where pension costs at the state level were skyrocketing. And if everybody remembers, but we used to pay about $500,000 a year into the pension fund of the state. And that slowly rose from $500,000 to about $3 or $4 million per year. So the costs were rising dramatically. And at that point, the district was trying to look at every single resource to say, how could we not just simply dump that on the taxpayers? How can we look for every asset that we have and make sure that we're using it in a proper manner? So that was the impetus for at least considering this property. Since then, we did get some offers for it, and we partnered with the borough since then to look at what are the options. The district put out a statement, I think in 2019, when we first made this public, saying, we looked at this asset, it was adjacent to the largest commercial district in the borough. It was something that we were, not utilizing. It was underutilized. It was used by our varsity baseball team. It was used by soccer, boys and girls soccer. It was used by little Cougars. But there were large gaps in time where it wasn't used, and then in the general community use, it was fenced off. So none of us, included, could use it on a recreational basis. So when we looked at all of those things, to kind of give context for those are questions, we said, okay, we should consider alternative options. And if we can maximize the use of this, both in the short term, and if we can help alleviate the tax burden on taxpayers, we should at least consider it, that would be a prudent thing to do. So we went through that path. This is another phase of that path. To answer your question very directly, there's nothing decided. It is an option to say, do nothing. It is an underutilized asset. The district has said, the 9 of us on the board and the administration said, we believe it can be more effective for the community with a different makeup or different development, but that has not been decided. And if, I'll make up a scenario, if 90% of the public says, school board, we want it exactly as it is, and we don't care if our taxes go up by 50%, we want to keep it as is, and we listen to the public and we follow that. But we've heard plenty of other people saying they want to have every option to find a way to reduce our tax load or mitigate higher taxes. So we're trying to look at all the options. That might have been more than you asked for, but is that?
Well, so like, in the event that Carl.
We need to
Linden
use
gets-
Because otherwise you can't hear it.
Yeah, in the event that Carlton gets absorbed by a larger district, does Crafton then lose green space forever? So like, that would be my concern. Maybe it's not a question that's answerable, but just hypothetically, you know, I've been teaching for 16 years now, so like, I've seen mergers happen. If Carlton gets absorbed by Montour like CB, hypothetically, does Crafton lose out on green space? That's my concern, kind of long run, because I'm more concerned about Crafton.
Gotcha, sure. I'm a Craftsman resident as well, so I have a dual role both as a school board member and a citizen. The topic of mergers has come up several times. There are 500 districts across Pennsylvania, and other states have 10 or 12 or 15 districts, so there's a large number. Most of the efforts I've heard of have not been successful or not interested by either Republicans or Democrats. There's lots of boroughs, municipalities across Pennsylvania as well, and there has been talk for decades about possibly reducing that, but it hasn't been successful. So I don't see anything on the horizon that says Carleton is going to be a part of any other district, whether we would accept somebody else or we would get eaten up by somebody else. I don't see that on the horizon for decades, but you never know. So as far as Crafton's control over it, I guess Crafton has limited control over that front piece right now. It is sort of jointly owned by the district and the borough currently. The district has the ability to sell the back piece unilaterally, but it has to do that within the restrictions that the current zoning provides. So I think the current zoning is residential. Community residential. So the district could sell it next week and the developer could put up condos. And other than making sure that that development fits within the borough's current zoning regulations, I don't think anybody in this room, me included, could do anything about it. So it's a matter now of the district and the borough trying to cooperate, come together and say, what does the community really want? And could we, as two separate organizational entities, come together and make a thoughtful development that includes most of the community's desires? And if we can do that in a way that does not negatively impact our taxes, then I think that's a win. Maybe that mix doesn't come together. Maybe it's not possible. I don't know. But I think we're both organizations are generally trying to find that happy medium. So does that answer? Okay.
Jim, first, let me thank you for your service on the school board. I know that this is one of those times when it's a very thankless position to be in. But my original question was, since we have both Roslyn Farms and Carnegie, is the district explored alternatives, perhaps property in Roslyn or Carnegie that they could develop instead of the last green space we have here? And the second part that you brought up, you just made the statement that kind of, in my mind, conflicts with what Jim said, that the district can sell it tomorrow. And my understanding was Jim said there would at least be a year's process before you could sell it.
Good question. And first of all, echo your thanks for board service, because you've served for many years and got the district through many difficult situations. So thank you for your service. The district owns outright the rear portion of the property, that 3.5-ish acres. The district could sell that piece tomorrow unilaterally. The front piece is currently owned by the borough,
but with a reverter clause because of that 1999 transaction that you referenced. In that transaction, the sale in 1999 of that front piece from the district to the borough for $1 was contingent upon the borough wanting to use it for borough purposes. And it said in that sale agreement, if at any time the borough decides it doesn't want to use it for borough purposes, or if the district decides it needs to use it, then the district can notify the borough, and within 1 year or after 1 year delay, the district could then buy it back for that $1. So that's, I think, what Jim was referencing in that clause.
Thanks. Maybe 1 year heads up before the school board could execute on that clause.
Can we get the microphone, please?
Rock and Mark. Rock. So is it because they are more powerful than Rock? So why the Rock? Okay.
Yeah, let's go ahead, Glenn.
Right, so one of the important things that I think that has been brought up before, I just want to reiterate that there is some activity over there with children's sports. And I know in earlier discussions, the key thing is that the school board and the borough are committed that if this changes purposes, that there will be alternatives for every team that is working. Is that correct?
Correct. Is that correct? Took his mic away. Correct. All right. Thank you, Jim, for the feedback. Let him off the hot seat for a second. Let's hear from some folks we have not heard from yet, who are new to this session. You raised your hand and said you have not, you were not at the last session. There are some questions up here. I think we want to answer questions to make sure people have the information certain.
I was on the Zoom last time.
Yes.
I have a different question. Can I say that? So I have personality disorder, so.
Yeah.
Okay, I have two questions, or one thing to ask is it more important that the school district get the immediate, let's say, $3 million? Let's just say that's a thing, $3 million. And then they want also, the borough and the school district want the continued revenue of the new development. If we could figure out a way to get the school district there, however many dollars it's gonna cost, $3 or $4 million to buy that thing, would that be enough? Or is the push gonna be so hard because they want the continued revenue that it wouldn't matter if citizens or some way we found out a way to find the $3 or $4 million to buy it? Would that be enough so that we could keep it and make it what we want to do?
I think they said unless, but my understanding is, you guys correct me if I'm wrong, but can we flip back up to that chart? I know it's a little wonky, but it helps tell the picture here, which is that gray line is the gas station. It's a pretty low taxable use, which is why that curve is pretty low. But my understanding is that the durable long-term tax revenue is the interest. And it's why there is a time period associated. And I did not mention this at the beginning, but this threshold that we have right here, any alternative plans that the borough or the school district would like to take into consideration, they will have to go to the magisterial judge and prove to them that this is a better value from a fiscal standpoint than the offer that was received back in 2017, 2018. That's just what I've been told. And so that's why this is really important, is to say whatever happens here needs to sort of beat that curve in the long term, because that is what the intention of this is to create durable value so that taxes can stay more stable.
What is the projected annual tax revenue? What is this big honest thing? What is the projected annual tax revenue over the purchase price that would be a sustainable number that they're looking to, or what's ever in your
Yeah, there is. I will. I'm not gonna open up the spreadsheet in the room. But what I will say is that I lost my train of thought trying to answer that question.
taxable, the
Yeah.
projected taxable income per year?
Right. It's.
I can't read that.
It depends on. That's what I was thinking. It depends on the time horizon. That kind of depends on what it is. And I think what we've heard is that the 15 years really sort of the longest horizon. So that means anything that's considered to sort of equate to that needs to hit that ROI before 15 years, maybe closer to 10.
Hey, Chris,
Yes, sir.
30 seconds to just briefly describe that chart and why one development has one tax profile and one a different one has a different. That may help.
Sure, sure. So what we're showing here is against this benchmark, we plotted a 10-year, 15-year, and a 20-year. The initial sale was $3.6 million, or would be for that offer, right? And if we assume, the first 3 years they're under construction, doesn't get reassessed until the beginning of the third year, so there's a 3-year delay. We look at what that value is, which combines the property sale and the total taxable value over that time. We get to a 10-year value of $4.4 million. We get to a 15-year value of $4.9 million and a 20-year value of $5.2 million. So those are essentially the benchmarks that we've been using to model these curves that then say, if we want to try to hit that target in that horizon, we need to sort of model our curve, and there are spreadsheets full of planning level assumptions that sort of get there. And when you go to the next slide and you look at some of the math we've done here, we talk about the benchmark. That begins a 15-year benchmark, and we sort of did a modeling exercise here where we did that by acre. So we compared the total land that use could typically take, as well as a potential market value that's pretty consistent throughout the marketplace. And when we combine those, that's where we can then understand that if we look at that on a by acre basis across 15 years, it's not going to get us there, right? That's why it says it's well below the benchmark for the gas station, below the benchmark for the commercial. And then if we go to the next one for the residential, you can see there, the townhouses meet it, and the condos start to exceed that. And the reason is because we get more residential density, that the taxable income from residences is higher than for commercial properties. And so it's hopefully it's a little kind of helpful to the layperson to understand how these things kind of perform for the different types. But like I said, I think what we really want to make sure we hear is not get lost in spreadsheets and numbers, and really want to make sure we hear what could this be, what are the values, right? We've heard from the last session, we got to make sure that we're thinking of our kids. We've got to make sure we're thinking about the long-term sustainability of the site, and that this is still a place that's cherished and valued by Crafton. What does that look like if not a park? What are some other things that could deliver that value? Somebody who has not spoken yet, sir.
Yeah, I have much, so I'll 2 seconds. The taxable, the long-term tax revenue implications here is just one variable. Both the borough and for the schools, two taxing bodies for everybody that lives in this town, right? We're trying to get input because there's a balance to each of these benefits, right? To privately fundraise $4 to $6 million and have a private group purchase that property would be great, but if it ends up just green space, right? There's maintenance costs. If the school were to keep it, there's maintenance costs. If the borough were to theoretically buy it, turn it into a park and give the cash injection, we'd have to raise taxes to fund that likely. And then we'd have to pay staff to go maintain it. So that's not to say that any of these are bad options, right? None of them are bad options, but they all have trade-offs. And I think a lot of the input I've heard in the last 10 years living here is that the taxes are too damn high, right? From both sides. And nobody likes it when you have to raise taxes. So I think that is part of the reason maybe you hear a lot of weight behind the tax revenue variable, because that's something we get a lot of feedback on. So what's that?
Somebody we have not, I see the hand up, but who has not spoken yet? Because I want to make sure we prioritize things we have not seen from this gentleman in the blue shirt right here. Let's see. Right here.
Blue. And then Dustin.
So I have a couple of thoughts. First, if the school is selling, I believe that the best option would be for a more mixed use type of property use. Because it keeps the community involved and gives them access to the property. Whereas if you have a private ownership, like private residential, community is not allowed to come onto the property as much as a mixed use. Along with that, I would encourage the borough and whoever's developing it to also consider the use of the roof. You could have possibly keep the mini golf on top of the roof. Or you could also have it's called a green roof, and also have green space on the roof as well. I would also notice that the proposed acreages on the mixed use is 1 to 2, condo 1 to 2, townhouse is less than 1. Considering the size of the property, I also looked at how big is an American football field? It's 1.32 acres. That would, rounding it up to 1.5, you would still have 3 and 3.75 acres to develop, and you could still put a couple of mixed-use properties and a condo and a whatever you have there. And finally, took a walk by it because I live literally down the road. There is a historical marker there. Apparently, it was the former site of Hans Hospital, a 2-story log cabin opened in 1778, which included 10 blockhouses. I would encourage any development to do an archaeological survey to make sure that any potential artifacts in the ground get found before they put a deep foundation in.
Yeah.
And as a renter, I would also like to see all my rent prices stabilized with a whole bunch of new units in the area, which could be achieved with mixed-use property.
But before I do the next few, what I will say is I think it's good feedback. I appreciate it. I didn't call out Sydney and Barris for next. She's over there writing stuff down at rapid speed. Her hand is recovered from the last session. But I think what I think is helpful there specifically is the types of things that we can help influence with the development, right? So being able to talk about things like the character of the development, the green architectural components, so those are things you can drive. We could talk about things like setbacks and property lines. We could talk about character of the first floor. Where do we want that active frontage? Do you want it facing Student or do you want it facing Linden? Those are all things within sort of the parameters of the vision that I think we can put on paper for a future development that they would need to be able to use. Because at the end of this, if the school board decides to move forward, there could be an RFP for developers that would very clearly stipulate what would need to happen. One of the things that it could include is an amount of green space, right? That could be something that could be stipulated in the agreement, is to maintain a certain amount of green space within the development. So, thank you.
I wanted to address the historical marker. I did some research on this a number of years ago when we had an active historical society. And my understanding, and I think we should get that clarified absolutely, is that that's just an approximation because it was actually closer to the land of going into the river and the description. So it's really more to commemorate, and they're not sure exactly where it was. So, but definitely, I agree. Something to just make sure that that's not the spot. Addie, do you have a question?
Sure. I guess I moved here more recently and I don't have the same sentimental feelings for the open space fields that are part of what y'all don't want to lose. But I do feel that Crafton has a great park and has a lot of really good open space over in the park that I think is underutilized. Like, I don't understand why we don't have a farmer's market, but I'm just wondering if there isn't some way to kind of try to make everybody happy and come up with a plan, which everybody can do their input and somehow you do have to give some mixed, some housing in there. And I think that Crafton, through the years, it was, from what I understand, amazing and looking at the history books and things like that, what it was just this little hallmark town and through fires and different things, it's kind of lost this main drag of cute, quaint area. And the only place that's really left is that frontage where the putt-putt area is. And so if we did come up with some kind of a plan, it could maybe somehow be lucrative for Crafton because, it's expensive to do all these things. And even just to keep it open space. Maybe you're able to keep the ball field, but maybe they can also design something where you have this cute little storefront area that draws attention to other businesses, to other people that would want to live here and come into town. And it would look, nice if you're going through town on 60. But maybe there's just a way for everybody to be happy to be able to incorporate, like you said, however big the football field is. Maybe you can keep that. Maybe you can add tennis courts. Maybe put in, someone mentioned a little pond or something like that, and you can take your kids over and feed the ducks. And so there can be the open space, but there can also maybe be something that would be helpful to the borough and the.
Appreciate that. Thank you. Yeah, I think that absolutely is in contention. Is an idea that it doesn't all have to be. When we talk about development, we're not necessarily talking about building corner to corner across the site. That we can stipulate where there need to be some green space, right? Where there may need to be buffers from residences, screens, things like that help make sure it's situated in the neighborhood, but that there could be a space that remains publicly accessible. Yeah. Anybody we haven't heard from yet? We got. Did you? Okay.
No, thank you.
All right, we got one person right back there, but then we'll come to you. Welcome.
I have a question. So as it stands now, if the borough wants to sell property, it would be sold as R2.
It's currently zoned community residential. Yes.
So, all right, so R2. So anybody who had to buy it would have to purchase it with residential property.
Correct. Community residential does not have any commercial uses in it. So if we did want to consider some mixed use or commercial uses, it would need to be rezoned. Correct.
So then it would need to go to borough council.
Correct.
That.
Yep.
Okay. And until he gets any type of housing, I'd like to see some type of community recreation, something for the kids.
Thank you. We got a first public meeting.
Just correct me if I'm wrong there, I don't think we answered the question. The district doesn't own property in Roslyn Farms or Carnegie. So that is, somebody brought up about why aren't we looking there? We don't own any property there, so we can't come in to those communities and say, hey, we're turning your green space into this or whatever, because we own zero property in those areas outside of the elementary school in Carnegie. So I don't know who asked that question, but we own no property outside of anywhere but Crafton.
Thank you very much. Somebody we have not heard from. I see some hands from big folks that were you here last time?
Don't ask them.
You get to use your question right now.
My thought in general is, my hope would be that it would stay green space, but way better utilized than what it is now, because I think it's just sitting there most of the time doing nothing. With that being said though, I do have a question about, is this like an all or nothing? Like, is it all the acreage has to be sold? Or if it isn't, is it like that benchmark, so much per acre? And that, another question is, you say, okay, we're gonna sell this to a developer, you're gonna build these condos, and you have to have this green space. What stops them in 10 years from saying, we own this property, we don't want it to be green space, we can do what we want?
Yeah. So first question. Yeah, really don't.
Yeah, turn it off to stay back. Sure.
Smart. Is there an option where only a portion of the site is sold? I don't have an answer to that unless these gentlemen do, in which case we can say we own it. I think we can look at some alternatives, we can look at some sneaks to see what that does. What I will say is that the more that the site reduces, right, the higher those individual buildings have to perform fiscally, sort of make up for the green space that was taken offline, right? And so that's where I think, if we go to some of the examples where we talk about green space, right? If you add some floors to the building, that's sort of taking some space and consolidating it in the building, so you can have more green space. It just might mean that the building is bigger, right? So that's one option, or your first question. Your second question was, remind me of your second question.
What happens if, well, can I ask a question about that?
Yeah.
So right now it's, what is it, 3.6 million or whatever is your benchmark?
Correct.
That's for the total acreage.
Correct, yeah.
But wouldn't you have a different benchmark if you didn't sell the whole thing?
Interesting question. What you're saying is that 3.6 applies to the whole site, and if you're only gonna sell half of it, you still have the same requirements.
Yeah, wouldn't you
Because
have,
you're not selling
instead
the
of
property.
3.6?
That's an interesting question.
A different.
I will look at that. I don't know the answer to it, but I think we can report back.
Okay.
And you had a second question.
The second question was, what stops, if you say you sell to a developer today, you have to have this green space, what happens in 10 years if they say, hey, we don't wanna have the green space anymore? Can they just build whatever? What would keep them, because it's their property?
It is their property, but there are terms that you can attach to the development agreement, right? So it's in terms of how the contract is written, the approvals. And so as a developer goes through, it's not just the process is not simply we sell it, it's theirs, and they can make this and build something completely different, right? There are intervals struck away that they have bonded. They have to put money down and on the line. And if they don't meet the requirements of the development agreement, it's under this, they forfeit that money, right? And so those are some of the ways that you can benchmark the development and make sure that you really are getting what was agreed to in development. There's also the site development approval process, to go through council, right? So whatever this isn't just going willy-nilly, it does have to go through zoning, it gets rezoned, does have to go through site plan approval. So there is a process that has to go through. So, there were no argument from what they said if they want.
You could also do an easement. You could have a permanent or 100-year easement for a trail. And that would be, controlled for as long as there's a real easement. And you could have very specific language. I know it was said last time that it would be just the retention pond. That's if it's poorly written. If you have good language, you could have it be something more significant. Another thing, when it comes to the benchmarking, the most valuable piece is the piece on Steuben. Sorry, the most valuable piece is the piece on Steuben. So I don't think nobody's wed to any ideas. And that's the whole idea behind this process, is to get as much information so that we understand what the values are and understand where the decision points are. If we could get a developer that commits to just developing the frontage and then doing some other kind of park, but I would keep in mind when it comes to just paying for it, having the park, we are underfunded right now to keep control and manage our parks as we have now. I would love for every one of the trails to be crushed limestone and managed really well. But it costs a lot of money. Just doing Baker's Acres, which is 0.39 miles, it's gonna cost us like $400,000. So maintaining that and spending that is all, it takes money. So you don't want to just buy land that you can't do anything with and just sit on. You want to have it so you can use it for that community good.
Anybody we have not heard from yet? I saw that did not. All right.
Very Bidgley, and first of all, I want to go on record. I want to keep this green space for recreational and community use. I do not want housing. I certainly do not want commercial property on there. I think what we have to look at is what does that space have to offer traffic? Okay, you have somebody that's looking with a family and they want to say, okay, where's a nice place to live that's affordable and, offers amenities, okay? We are surrounded by that, okay? Robinson, tons of amenities. South Fayette, tons of amenities. Upper St. Clair, tons of amenities. Nobody's going to look at Crafton 5 years from now and say, wow, look at that, those townhouses. They're so different than the ones I can buy in Robinson. Or they're not gonna say, oh, look at that nice storefront. That is not what people are gonna look for Crafton for. They're gonna look and say, wow, isn't that a great common space? I understand it's about money. I'm not that naive, but I think why we're rushing to say, should it be townhouses, should it be condos, should it be mixed use? We're not exploring where might we find the funds to make it a community thing. Like, I feel like we're like being rushed. Like if the community agrees that we want to explore it as community space, then we should be given the opportunity to spend that time to look at it.
Good comments, and I appreciate that. One thing I will say is we will be, I think, from the comments that we've heard, there will be a green space team. We'll be able to sort of look at that and pull through and compare sort of side by side where a green space scheme looks like alongside some other developments. So I don't, I want to make sure that people hear that just to say, this is, no decisions have been made yet. So green space is a scheme that we want to model. I want to see what that looks like. That's something we're going to do, and we'll have something for you here in months to share. Anybody else we have not heard from? I see the hands. But anybody, this is the last call for anybody we have not heard from. Yes, sir.
So I have a comment and a question. My comment first is, we would all say that the school brings in a lot of money within the stadium. No one will raise their kids between the Pirates and the Steelers. So I'm thinking going money first, not looking at how it actually affects the community is not the right way to look at this. And as a question, from what I understand, the reason that Arlington wants to sell the properties because it's not being fully utilized. Have we looked at ways to keep the property while actually utilizing it? Like renting it out to a beer league or a flag football league or something like that, in between what normal school properties. I know St. Paul Seminary, for example, has a flag football league, and they're not charging like millions of dollars, but it's some amount of income. Has that been explored at all?
To quickly answer, yeah, the district has explored what would renting it out in between uses be, and in general, we do rent out a lot of our facilities for community groups to use, and the revenue that we can generate from that is relatively small. So if we have an existing asset that we're using heavily, we want to keep, but we're able to supplement it, that's a great way to do it. The value that we think in this, both from the previous offer and from all these options that Chris and the team have brought forth, are infinitely more valuable than you can get from just leasing out fields to other groups. At least that's what we found so far.
All right. Anybody else we have not heard from yet? Yes, ma'am.
My last call. I'm absolutely in favor of keeping this a public green space for the community without the constraints of a developer telling us we get a 4-foot sidewalk around the outer edge. Also, whenever you're developed, your community loses control over what happens in that space. Those businesses could fail in 2 years, they could move out. The trees that may be mandated to be put on that property die, and no one goes back to them and says, you need to plant 10 more now. We should use it much better for our community and find a way for that. I don't think the money that's going to come in from that is going to plug Arlington's school district budget problem for very long. If you think $3.7 million is going to go far, look into what that represents in their full budgets, and you'll see that that is de minimis. And I hope everybody else will be more critical in looking at what that funding will actually do for the school district.
Thank you very much.
Chris, we have 2 people online. So
2 people online. All right. Seriously, I'm online voices.
Never.
Yes, you can.
Deborah Reagan, we're going to unmute you so you can ask your question.
Hello, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I gotta do the mic. Okay, try again.
Hello, can you hear me?
You guys hear that?
No, I'll set the Zoom.
Try that again. Debbie, can you ask one more time?
Can you guys hear me?
All right, I'll repeat your question then.
Oh, okay. I have a bunch of comments. One is the survey that was out. While nice, there's nothing that indicates that the people completing the survey are Crafton residents. Anybody complete that survey. They can be in California. They could be part of this consultant group. They can complete it more than once. Another thing is the shopping center. It's not full. We can't even put businesses in the shopping center. What makes, you think this mixed commercial district is going to attract any more people. Also, too, I live in the area. Maxwell, when they put in Walgreens, it floods now. So we're very concerned what other flooding is going to happen when they disturb that property. Maxwell floods very frequently, as anyone can tell you. The gentleman keeps talking about Aldi's or Trader Joe's. I'm under the impression that Giant Eagle will not allow a grocery store within a certain range. Is that true or false? And then are they looking at the traffic patterns, the parking? That is a big impact.
Thank you. How much of that did everyone hear? Most of it or? Okay, good. Okay.
So, all right, question number one about the survey. We do ask that people provide where they live. We do ask people to say in the survey that you're a Crafton resident, you're a nearby resident, and what proximity you live to the site. We also ask that people provide your name and email address. Nothing's perfect. Even we can be hacked by people who want to do nefarious things with the survey. But we're doing the best we can to make sure that we are hearing people that are here in the community, and that's why we asked that question. The second question was about Giant Eagle. Do you want to answer that?
Yes, they, Giant Eagle does not have that control, but they did sign it into their lease. So for that property owner, the one who owns the rest of the shopping center. So in the current shopping center, you cannot build a grocery store because they have that agreement. The Giant Eagle cannot control what the rest of the land can be used in.
Yeah, I think that's something to articulate, because we did hear this last time too, is to say, we have a bunch of businesses in the center, why aren't we using that? Why are we talking about building more commercial? And the reality is there's a number of agreements we're not privy to the private landowner that owns that full shopping center. And that's a good example, is that Giant Eagle has veto power to be able to say, we don't want another grocer in the plaza. And so when we look at other new commercial space, right, I think the flip side opinion might be, well, this may actually open up opportunities for things that we may have wanted that we've never seen come to the plaza because of some of those agreements that are behind the scenes that we may not be privy to. So I think that's one thing just to highlight when we talk about that. Question number 3. Parking. Sit down, stop. Parking is certainly a concern. I think we'll look at this and we will be running parking counts as part of the scenarios. We won't be doing a full traffic count, but this development will be subject to a traffic impact study, just like anything else that gets built. Transportation engineer, they got to look at signal timing, turning movements. They got to do all the math to make sure that the system still works and maintains a high level of service. And typically in those traffic impact studies, if they say that you need to make adjustments to the traffic flow, that would be a developer responsibility, is to make sure that the traffic is actually working. That's what's that? Flooding. Flooding. What I can say is that certainly there will be stormwater management written into whatever is recommended for this, and will be subject to all the stormwater management requirements. I can't speak specifically to Walgreens. I'm not privy to any of the stormwater issues or how that came to be, but I think it's a point well taken. It's a flat site, which is rare amongst Western Pennsylvania, and I think looking at where the water goes is certainly something that's required. Something I will say is that all the modeling that we've done in the presentation that we shared this evening already assumed that we were taking 10% or stormwater management on site. So all these, it's not gonna have to be sort of redone to build it stormwater management. That's the baseline requirement. So,
And Kristen and Julie, I'm going to unmute you now. Ask you to unmute.
Hello, can you guys hear me?
Yeah, can you talk as loud as you can?
Okay, is this better?
Yeah, that's good.
Okay. So I have a couple comments. The first I'm going to bring up is something that a couple people have already reiterated. If the district and if Crafton sells to a private entity for development, that's not any guarantee of long-term tax revenue for the district nor for Crafton itself. We could agree to sell the property to a developer and it could become vacant, just like already have many vacant retail or commercial properties on Krenel, on Noble, on Crafton Boulevard. We could have a development go in there, whether it's mixed use, strictly residential, commercial, and there could be a fire and it could burn down and it could sit vacant for 8 years, just like what's going on in the middle of Main Street, Carnegie, with the former Papa J's site. There's also the former Riley's Poorhouse site, which even more recently burnt down. So, there's no tax revenue, maybe just property tax, but there's no long-term or ongoing, business tax revenue from those sites. And because, as was mentioned, those properties are not owned by Carnegie, there's nothing Carnegie can do to compel the owners to develop that property. So they cannot regain control of that property unless they buy it, and they can't get any, commercial revenue from there. So with that in mind, could there be a possibility where either the school district or we as the borough, rather than selling the property outright for development, could we lease the property to a developer so that in the case that the property becomes vacant, we have control somewhat to refill it. And the other thing is that if we sell that property to a developer, now we have in that same tiny shopping center area, now you have 5 separate private property owners to deal with, as opposed to the 4 that currently own the shopping center that we, again, cannot compel to, modernize the storefronts to encourage new businesses. So one question is, could we lease the property? Back in 2022, Crafton spent money on a market study for this very property. And so my question is, where are the results of that market study? Where is that information available? Is it publicly available? And if not, could it be? A couple people have brought up questions about Crafton buying the property outright from the school district. Is that something that could be considered? Sure, we might have to have our property, taxes raised, or we see an increase in taxes, but I personally would prefer that than selling to a developer outright. And I just wanted to say that I've seen or I've heard, talking with people, there's been some concern, some conversation around the utility of having Crafton Park, which is a green space, right across the street from yet another green space. And, perhaps is that the best use of green space? And I would argue that that is fine, because the point of the park or a green space is not to be overdeveloped. You don't want to have amenities on top of each other. You don't want to have the pool on top of a bocce court, on top of a ball field. You want to have space so that people can spread out, they can relax, and that allows the green space to do its thing, create habitat for wildlife, help mitigate heat island effect. And that's my last comment.
Thank you very much. All right, Sid, question number 1. What was it?
It could be leased to a developer.
Could we lease to a developer? That is certainly an option. Yeah, I don't think we're in a position to say that's not the case. I think there's, those are all going to be pretty to parts of the deal structuring, which can, make or break how some of these things work, but I don't think we can say that that's certainly not a possibility at this point. And I will say too, the point about it could burn down, that is, and we have no guarantees that it would generate tax revenue. That is certainly true too, right? That could happen to any building, anywhere in Grafton. Something could burn down and, the borough would be in a similar position of having to try to recover tax revenue that might be lost from that disaster. Question number 2.
The concern is that there will be multiple new property owners that you'll have to deal with in the future. Like, what can you kind of do about that or think about?
Yeah, I don't have an answer to that. I would say that is certainly a reality is you have a new property owner. Is that all of them?
There's one more, which is where the results of the previous.
Yes, and Jim can speak to that, but I will say, before I do, is that we've seen it. We saw it, we read the market study, and it does have some pretty compelling results in there about what could function on that site. It did demonstrate that there is a strong market demand for residential. Market rate residential development on that site, given sort of the housing system. And, that's good news because it means that those are properties that would be pretty high performing, and a market rate property would not be subsidized, it'd be full tax stamp for that property.
2 things. One thing I want to add to the leasing question is the bulk of the tax revenue comes from property taxes. If you're a nonprofit, if you're a municipal or school entity leasing it, you're not paying a lot of property taxes on it, so that would lessen the value of it. And then what was the second question? Oh, where to find it? It's on the planning commission page. So if you go to the planning commission page, towards the bottom of that, there's a whole list on that page of all the different planning studies. It has been up there since 2024, and since the website changed as well. So you can find it on that page.
All right. Anybody else online?
Yes. Yeah, there's one other person online, but they have spoken. So we're going back to how are we gonna handle?
I would really like to make sure that anybody who has not been had a chance to say anything takes the opportunity. So that we make sure we're hearing from folks who have not had an opportunity to speak. I think we heard a lot of really good feedback this time. We had a lot of good feedback this time too. So last call. Hearing no signal. All right. Well, let's do this. Let's do one round of comments from folks. Like I said, this is really just listening. So if there's something that's new and compelling that you'd like to share, maybe keep it kind of brief, because we have heard a lot of perspectives and made sure we documented that last time. Sydney's arm tells the tale. She wrote all the notes down. So one round of folks that were here last time that like say, oh.
I was going to say that you were going to the slideshow and you had a screen that popped up that you could really talk about, and I thought it had some good questions on it. A black screen with just for those who
yeah, you want to go ahead and share that? All right. That you might have put the questions up. Yeah, of the presentation. Yeah, this man.
Thank you. So Brittany made a comment earlier that there is no property owned by the school board in Carnegie or Roslyn. I don't know of any other properties that the school district might own in Grafton other than the property of discussion tonight. But if you were to sell that property for say $4 to $6 million or even more. Obviously, there's going to have to be additional investment into other recreational space for those various teams. Knowing that there is no other property owned in Carnegie or Roslyn, where then would those activities take place in the future? And there's going to be obviously expense. So if you sell the property for an immediate $4 to $6 million, you might have $2 million in developing new properties that also require ongoing maintenance. So, and one other thing about, development, I'm not opposed. I'm always looking for brighter futures, and I feel that there could be some traffic patterns that would be very unsafe for the residents. I had a neighbor that was hit on Steuben Street with her child in a stroller. And that's not with any additional development. My concern would be that if there is some development, could there be one of those arches that would connect, was we talk about connections from that particular 5.25 acres over to Crafton Park, maybe with some additional amenities, maybe not stacking them too much, as Kristen said. But again, I think that there's going to be some ongoing expenses that we need to consider and maybe even show before you would move forward is where would the green space be? What would it look like? Just as you've done for the 5.25 miles, maybe show those other spaces so that we know we will have green space.
I mean, if you want,
I can quickly address the district and the sports. If, when we explored this 7, 8, 9 years ago, whatever, there were alternatives. So we identified every sport that currently used that Linden Avenue property. And then we said, do we have other assets within the district that we could use? And I think 80% of our sports, we could find an existing asset that we could use. For baseball, though, we did not have another field that was a district-owned asset. So then we looked at both 7th Avenue, Carnegie, and the CIT fields in Crafton as two properly sized, adequate facilities that would serve. And we talked to both parties about potentially sharing that field with them. And we recognized that we would have to take a portion of the sale proceeds to help provide the necessary upgrades to make that suitable for us and for the host. So yes, there would likely be some investment from a sale that would go back into making sure that the athletic facilities are appropriate for all of our teams. One other question came up last time about that plan, and the athletic director, with the new athletic director this year, he is dusting off that old plan, revisiting each of the teams, revisiting each of the sites, and there were some changes in 8 or 9 years usage, so that is currently being updated. We don't have that done yet, but we'll get it done shortly. We'll share it with everybody, but hopefully that answers your question.
One thing that I have to think about regarding the arch, you're talking about like a pedestrian arch that goes over Steuben. What I can say is we have seen those projects before. This is not saying that pedestrian safety and crossing the street is not a paramount importance. But like I said, there's nothing worse than spending $1.5 million putting those up just to see somebody cross the street underneath. We do find that a lot of times there's a resistance to actually going up and over when you do build those things. But it is a great idea. And the point's taken, I think it's that type of creativity that's going to help solve some of the problems.
What about the just raised waterways? I mean, they talk about that a lot for schools and things like that. So it's a crosswalk, but it's
The crosswalk that's elevated, yeah. I think we can look at that. It is a PennDOT road. If you guys have ever worked with PennDOT, you know that it's difficult. So I would say
just got those signals there were placed already.
yeah, I mean, that is a consideration of that side as well. But I think that's, again, those are the types of things we can think about. Maybe it doesn't happen directly there, but because that's the major crossing. But those are the types of things you could program into the vision. Say, here's what it's going to look like to make sure it looks not just attractive, but safe for everybody. And we'll look at those within.
Maybe excavate the whole side and crack the park. A lot of dead space back there.
Cool.
Yeah, I'd like to bring up a couple points. First, I think that using the term green space is way too generic. I think the public really wants a public park and recreation space. Using green space doesn't just mean about anything. Calling it a public park then really starts to define what I've heard from people both last time and this time. But so that's one point. The other thing is you show 4 scenarios, but you don't have the 5th scenario as a public park scenario. It would be nice if you did that. I would like to see, we had talked about this a little bit last time, to challenge you to try to make, as our consultant, to try to give us the argument of how we can actually get a public park there, versus these green spaces that you're talking about. I mean, there are ways, there's creative ways, there's ways of getting funding, different funding groups coming in, different donations, whatever. There's ways to get it done. in your career. I'm sure you've had projects like that you've had projects get funded in that way. So it would be nice if there was a fifth little tower here that actually shows a public park and recreation area. And then my last comment has to do with raising the taxes. I don't think a 50% tax increase. I think that's more of a threat than it is anything. But I looked at it, and using the 20-year line that you have put together, it looks to me, based on the $40 million budget of the school district, that we're looking at maybe a 0.17% of the budget. So we're less than 1%. We're like at we're at 0.17% of the budget that you're looking at gaining from selling this property over that time period. And I think that's more realistic. Let's look at it as where does it fit within the school budget? It's really a sliver of the pie. It's hardly anything. So I don't really think that we should give up the control of this space and the asset of a public park to less than 1% relief to the school budget.
Appreciate the comment. If it's simply very strongly left, and I can vote. Usually the stronger thing.
Hey, sorry, I'm gonna be super quick. So Kristen said a lot of what I wanted to say earlier from Zoom, but I really think, and I think Greg said it well too, it's like, once this is gone, like, it's never coming back. Nobody's ever gonna bulldoze empty storefronts and turn it back into a park. It's just never, ever gonna happen. And I think what Kristen said about it could burn out. We could have an economic downturn on a national level that none of us can do anything about. And then we have an empty strip mall in the middle of Crafton, right next to the mostly empty shopping plaza that we can't do anything about. I mean, I just can't stand the thought of like looking at just another rundown, empty thing that was like, yeah, maybe at some point aspirationally it could help pay for something. But I'm never going to look at the park, even the park in the state that it's in, which isn't the greatest thing in the world. I'm never going to look at that and be like, oh, I really regret that that's a park there, you know? So that's what I wanted to say. Thanks for your comment.
All right, any confessions we have not heard? No, you're good.
Sure.
You're good. Yeah.
So, once again, I'm listening to a lot of the feedback, and I just have some points that are coming into my mind as we're talking. I kind of will refute that this is a park. This is a green field that, like many have pointed out, is mostly underutilized by the community. If we will continue to use it as a green space, we have to make it open to everybody and not just utilizing it sometimes. Like, I'm willing to compromise with people. Like, I have made my intention clear or my perspective clear. I would like to see something new built there, but I'm also willing, and I've heard a lot of engagement, I'm willing to fight hard to incorporate green space into this area, to fight for a rec center and stuff. But what I fear and what I picked up in this meeting and the last one is a lot of people seem to have an and or argument. It is either it can either stay green space or be developed. We can do both. Like, genuinely, this is an open process that they want to hear our thoughts of. And I'm willing to compromise on my thing to both develop the community for the future and retain the green space. And I kind of would encourage people to have that spirit of compromise as well, because it is a once in a lifetime basically property, It's, like I mentioned before, it's along major public transit routes. It has all the amenities around it. And it just sits there. The mini golf is the one part that I am a little protective over because, I have a lot of friends that love going there. But we have a whole park across that is very much in need of investment. And I'm sorry, I would rather see this property developed and use that tax revenue, that investment, to then update Crafton Park, which is where everybody actually goes, not to mention Lindenwood, Noble, all the other parks that are very much desperate in need of investment. I would rather see the money go there than a field that nobody barely uses. And especially if it helps grow the community and grow the tax base and add more students to the school district, which is needed, and more tax revenue to the borough and school district, which is needed. You know, that's just my perspective on it.
Appreciate the input. All right, so we are coming to the end. We got 1, 2, and then we're gonna probably call it night. We're starting here.
We do have one more person.
Oh, we have one more online. My apologies.
Chris can re-raise your hand, but Nicole has not spoken tonight.
Well, let's hear from Nicole, and then let's do the 2 here, and one more online.
Oh, Nicole, I lost you. Can you raise your hand again?
Good participants.
There you go. There you go. Okay, you should be able to unmute now, Nicole.
So Nicole, you should be able to unmute.
Hear me? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, we're good. Go ahead.
Yay. All right. Thank you. Yeah, so you have a question on this slide about which priorities should be guiding this process. Apart from leveraging financial and urban planning expertise, I'm interested in understanding at a deeper level how this will impact residents for decades to come, which is, what we're talking about tonight. There's been a history recently with residents who are participating in decision-making processes, feeling like their comments aren't being heard or taken into account. And I would like to make a comment about the process and a way to reestablish that trust. You've clarified that you're listening, and that is great. And I'm certain that you care what people say and want your listening to be fair and objective. The problem is no one human is capable of truly being objective when they're just listening. All of us bring our personal and professional filters and biases to how we listen. So that means this process is going to be subjective until you have a formal process for documenting what everyone is saying here. It remains subjective if there isn't an independent process for tallying and assessing the knowledge that people are bringing. Every single person in this room has made a trade-off to spend their time listening and contributing and traveling to be there in this process. And for every person here, there are plenty more who couldn't afford that trade-off, whose opinions also matter. So my point is, if you want to ensure you're hearing from everybody, we should be outreaching directly to residents and seeing how they feel. Voluntary online samples have bias and are highly influenced by bots. I work with online data capture for a living. So my question is, can you please speak to the formal process for how people's opinions are being documented and accounted for? Exactly what is that data capture process, and how are you ensuring that all residents' opinions will be assessed fairly and objectively in this process? Thank you.
Yeah, I can absolutely take that. And that's a great question. I think something that is the reality of these projects, right? Is that we hear from the residents who show up. But I think that's the answer is we hear from the residents who choose to participate. We work really hard to hear from people and get the word out. But in any of these types of processes, when you're running community engagement, it's the folks that show up in the room that or participate in the survey or join a focus group. I've yet to see a process where every single resident of the community has been able to be sampled and their opinion mathematically tallied. We have some tools that we try to use, but even the best tools are just sampling data from segments of the population. And so I think what we'll be doing on this process is holding open forums like this, where you can hear your neighbors speak. We'll be documenting that. Cindy's cranked right hand is evidence of the note-taking that we'll have. That will all be documented and synthesized to the plan. We'll also be synthesizing the data from the survey. As I mentioned, we are asking for people's names. We're asking for their email. We're going to do the best we can to verify and make sure that they are not bots. But every process isn't perfect. We will be using that, and then we'll be coming back to the community and sharing that out. So the safeguards that we have are the people in this room to be able to come to the next session and be able to look at the information and tell us, is my voice showing up in that work, right? And that's why I invite you guys all back to the next session that we have where we are able to share the visions. Because hopefully that's where you are to see your voices show up in the work that's going to be in front of you. So that's the best I have on that question. Is there anybody else online that we are?
Kristen's already spoke for this one. Kristen, you want to?
Hey, Kristen, you want to go ahead and unmute?
Hi, can you guys hear me again?
Yeah.
just my final comment, I believe Jim stated that the Steuben Street piece of the Linden property is the most valuable portion of the property. And if that's the case, I would like to see, if possible, Crafton maintain that piece of property. And that way, you know, we maintain ownership, we maintain control, we can develop that portion how we see fit or whatnot. So if it's possible, you know, to buy that portion of, or just consider, right, buying that portion of the whole, you know, property outright from the district, I think that would be good.
Thank you. Thanks, Jason. Thank you very much. All right, we have two last voices. One here, one here. You already have mine, but you go here first.
Okay, I have a couple of quick ones. One, we haven't seen any diagrams to be able to see how this would actually look, and I'm trying to figure out how you would fit at your biggest thing, all the parking that you would need in there. And so along with parking, like how many spaces per apartment, per building, or whatever, because I'm having a hard time envisioning that you're gonna take this whole space and all that's gonna be left is building an asphalt. And I think that's hard for us to even make an informed decision when we can't see it. So that's one issue. And then if you're gonna take, and you're gonna put a mixed use in, now you're talking even more parking because you need the parking for those shops. Okay, there's nothing. And then if there was a gas station and two buildings was the base, why are we trying to cram so much into that space now? I don't think we need to cram that much in. I would love green space, guys, but the borough is never, or the school district is never. They're selling the property, and I'd at least like to get something that we're happy with. And so I'm trying to figure out how we can make it something that when we drive by, we're happy with what we came up with, because it's gonna happen, whether we like it or not. But I don't understand why we can't keep our frontage. There's 4 acres. There's a lot you can do on 4 acres and have us keep our frontage, keep us crafting, keep our mini golf course. And that's really about it. Like, I'd like to see some diagrams so we can see how the parking spaces are gonna fit. And I wanna know what type of apartments you're thinking about putting in there. Are they gonna be high-end? Because we don't have the amenities for high-end people to move in. They're not gonna move in, then they're gonna be vacant. But you don't want crap either, because then no one's gonna rent it if it's crap. So like, what are we talking about putting in this space to grow ground?
Great points all around. Absolutely, and I think you're setting me up for the next meeting where you guys can really dive back in, because that is the next step. This is I think the schemes that we had shown was really just sort of meant to illustrate what these things could look like. The next step is for us to actually put them on the site, see what that looks like, see how they lay out, do exactly what you said versus count parking. Make sure that that's all accommodated for. Look at the amount of asphalt. Look at how's that interface with the rest of the site, and make sure that this is something that is actually a value add community. We'll be able to do some views too, so we can see maybe from the street view, and sort of see some of the massing a little bit. So the next step will have, I think, a lot more information, because this step was really just sort of the concepts. So that was your first point. Your second was parking, and then the types of units. And we can't necessarily dictate exactly what types of units those are. But we can maybe look at what some of those are. I think what we modeled was all condos, simply because of driving from the fiscal.
Yeah, but are they condos with big master suites that, you know, feel like a spa? You know, like people around here can't afford that, and those kind of people aren't gonna move here. They're living up in Robinson where they have all the malls and all the eateries. I mean, we did that study to see who would develop here in Grafton.
Yep.
If we're not using that in tandem with this, it's kind of pointless. It's kind of pointless for all of it, because you can't set us up and say, well, this is what we can put in here, and then everyone looks at us like, yeah, we're not developing that there, then this was moved.
Well, hopefully it's not moved. I will say we are looking at that market set, and it did very clearly illustrate, I think it was something 700 unit shortage in a higher bracket. And So that gives us the clues, or at least the market signals, suggests that there is an appetite for good quality residential in the area. And so we're gonna use that, this is what we have, and I can show you, yeah, and hopefully you find it's not really it.
And I mean, developers aren't going to come build a 60-unit, like $1 million pop condo development here because it's big financial sense. So again, we can't really control what a developer could come in and do within the framework of zoning. But if they decided that, we think we could build a $60 million development here and make our money back in a year and make a try. And we're just doing our best to try to steer things here. We both can't control what they build there.
Yeah, I'm gonna just rattle off a couple of things quickly. First of all, thanks everybody for your comment. I would like to say that we do want to continue, as the planning commission now, more, the engagement we're having, this is great. When does the survey close? September 3rd.
September 3rd, survey closes, so make sure you take it.
So make sure you tell your neighbors. The only way we're gonna get more involvement is if each of you go to your neighbors and says, have you taken a look at the survey and would you please complete it? And so that's number one. Number two, in terms of listening to the community, I think I posted online a little while ago, all of the evidence that we have, this borough has listened to the community. But just would like to reinforce that we don't have a gas station. I said that last time. And so I take this very seriously. Speaking again from the planning commission, one of the things we heard in zoning was we need more dining options. If I can't tell you how many people said we need another Serafino's. Now Serafino's is never going to be replicated, but people want places to take their families locally. And we had a conversation last time about things that closed early, that were family friendly, but we would have dining. So I'm just representing that point of view from the input that was presented in the last zoning process. I will also offer that we have 5 acres, you're right. Let's use some for something, and we still have a lot, but we can do other things with. As far as the frontage on Student Street, my personal plea would be figure out how we don't have entrances that are gonna add to Student Street congestion. And I know you're thinking of that, but you also talked about traffic studies. As much as I hate those ones where you drive in and snake around, I hate them, but make sure that, and then the issue becomes how do you make it presentable on the back end if that is a storefront? So lots to consider. And then the final one is 2 things. People come to Crafton, my experience in talking to newcomers all the time is it's a walking community and they can't find where they can take their kids and walk. And there are the little playgrounds. And so the more we can look at those, and that brings me to, if we really want to do this, a longer range vision, like what do we do with the park and this? So if there's any way I could move that up on council's priority to really take a look at that in combination with this so that we could be thinking about the total green picture, including Green Park, green this, green that. So that would be, those are the ones. Thank you.
Excellent. Well, thank you all very much for your time this evening. This concludes our session. I'm happy to hang around for anybody who wanted to say something that didn't get a microphone. But I said this last time, and I'll say it this evening too. All the comments we received tonight are very much on the agenda. This is what we're here to do, is to hear diversity of perspectives and see what we can come up with that helps match those perspectives. So please take a survey if you haven't. Keep an eye out for the next community meeting, which I believe is in November, where we'll come back to you with some concepts. And thank you guys for staying engaged. Appreciate you.